Mortal Engines is a film about gigantic cities rolling around and eating each other. It's a peculiar premise, sure, but it proved to be interesting enough for a $5 ticket to see it. Now, there are quite a few things I like about Mortal Engines and quite a few things I don't, so I am going to organize this video into two sections, which I have named oh so originally, the good and the bad. Now, I would include the ugly as part of that if it wasn't just the bad but worse, and also it would be a reference to that classic movie that I haven't seen. Well, I don't know what else to say in this opening segment, so let's just get right into it then, shall we? There is a lot of things that just don't make sense in Mortal Engines, and I feel like that's less to do with the talent of those who wrote the screenplay, because they've earned their legendary statuses when it comes to that, and more to do with its restrictive 2-hour runtime. I could barely remember any of the characters' names during my viewing. In fact, let's just run through the names I used when discussing the characters with the friends I saw it with during and after our showing. Hester Shaw, Tom Riddle, Asian Action Lady, Strike, Elrond, and the blonde chick. This movie doesn't really do a good job of reminding you who is who. In fact, walking out of the theater, we could only associate 3 characters with their names, and we were only saying one of them correctly. Speaking of characters, a lot of them do things that don't exactly make sense. For example, at the beginning of the movie, Elrond pushes Tom off a platform that leads to him falling out of the city, which is one of the dumbest moves because for one, Tom was completely loyal to Elrond, and for 2, Elrond knows that this won't kill Tom, and instead he has just revealed his true nature to someone who would more than likely join one of the largest threats to him. Funnily enough, that was also the exact scene that broke my immersion. It was pretty good, and that's where everything started going downhill. Elrond also later releases Shrike from a prison by sinking the whole prison. Elrond didn't have to destroy the whole thing, he just had to shoot off some parts of Shrike's cell, as he does right after shooting the supports of the prison. Also, who makes a prison over water that can be destroyed so easily? Those supports were weak. A second large glaring issue is the fact that a lot of the story events lack context and motivations aren't really clear on anything in the film. They try to fill in some of these with flashback sequences, but they don't really cover enough to make me understand the motivations, and in some cases, the events themselves. A pretty blatant example of this is when Anna Fang delivers a throwaway line meant to establish her backstory. I sat there in the theater and I can recall my exact thought. It was, that would make for a pretty interesting movie. Unfortunately, that happened a lot. There is one exception, but we will get to it later. While we are talking about characters, can I just talk about how all of the citizens of London seem to be actual sadistic psychopaths who take immense pleasure and joy in watching the eradication of the homes of people who did nothing to them? Is that a ham-fisted political metaphor I'm sensing? Because I hope to God it's not. I already have to deal with them in Star Wars, I'd rather they not infect everything else as well. And then we have the reveal that Elrond is Hester's father. This scene's straight up stolen from a better film.
If you only knew the power of the dark side. Obi-Wan never told you what happened to your father.
As soon as I heard a line almost identical to what was said by Vader in The Empire Strikes Back, I knew what was coming, and got down on my knees and prayed it wouldn't be so. Yet it was. There was another thing that bothered me about Hester, besides the fact that she didn't wear the badass mask past the opening segment of the film, and that was about 25% of the reason why I was seeing the movie. When Hester initially reveals her past to Tom, she goes from I don't want to talk about it to here's my entire life story so fast it reminded me of a scene from the Netflix Death Note adaptation. If your movie makes me think of Netflix Death Note, you have a very serious and fundamental issue.
Death Note? What is it?
What is what?
Your book?
I can't tell you.
Okay.
Do you really want to know?
I mentioned earlier that there was an exception to the flashbacks not really filling in any of the characters' motivations at all. The exception to that would have to be the relationship between Shrike and Hester, and it's actually handled really well despite mostly being done through flashbacks. It shows us what life was like for Hester and Shrike prior to the events of the film, and sets up his motivation for hunting Hester throughout its duration in a way that makes the viewer sympathetic for Shrike. It's just a shame because even here I have things I can criticize. We don't exactly know what Shrike is, and a lot of his mannerisms and actions are somewhat perplexing because of this. That being said, he's still the best, and some may say only, good character in this film. The other thing that I really like is the world in which Mortal Engines is set. When I heard the plot pitch, I thought the world sounded ridiculous, but upon seeing the movie, that opinion was quickly changed. A lot of this could be due to the well-done cinematography and new steampunk-like imagery, but as we should know well by now, cinematography and imagery do not make a good film. Otherwise, I wouldn't have an at least 2-part series coming out on The Last Jedi at the beginning of next year. As a last final positive note, I thought the action scenes were pretty good. They're pretty entertaining to watch. Mortal Engines feels like a trilogy condensed down into a 2-hour film. It has a lot of potential, and given enough time to flesh out the world, the characters, and the relationships with one another, Mortal Engines could have been the next Lord of the Rings. But as it stands, Mortal Engines is far from that. It would require a hard reboot to fix a lot of the issues Mortal Engines presents. But because of the current film, I feel many will write off Mortal Engines as a failed attempt to top the Lord of the Rings trilogy. If anything good were to come from Mortal Engines, it's the fact that it's got me interested in picking up the novel, which I will do at some point when I have money for a novel. And with that being said, we once again return after a short hiatus to unscripted outro time. It's been a good couple months, hasn't it, since the Spider-Man review and the Turkey Day update. Well, I'm back making videos again. I just saw this film about last week or so, and I thought it was alright enough to make a video on. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm hard at work on the Last Jedi review and the Corpse Party critiques, and those should be coming out in the future. I can't give a solid release window yet because those are big projects. I can, however, give you an update on The Last Jedi, The Last Jedi rant, and that's going to be that the first half of scripting is done. And since it's going to be a 2-part thing, I can just record and edit that and have that on its way out to you guys, and that's that. And then we'll work on the second part. So, more videos soon. Channel's not dead. We're just working on large projects right now, and those are taking quite a while. I hope to do a couple of these smaller videos in between, though. So, yeah. That's that, and I will see you all in the next video, whatever I make. Peace.